What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Make Fit Happen podcast. Unfortunately, as you can tell, Jupe, my main man, is not here today. It is just me, so I'm doing the best I can with this intro because Jupe is usually the intro man. But Steve is with me today, Steven with a PH.
That's right. What's up, Amanda?
What's up? We're super excited to do this episode. We're going to go over a lot of stuff today. We're going to go over my diet. We're going to go over micronutrients, and we're going to go over how to build a healthy vegan diet. So we think it's going to be super informative and really interesting. So I'm excited to get into this.
Same. Let's get into it.
Let's do it. So the first part is we're going to talk about a little bit about my macros, and then we're going to talk about how Steve would set up my macros and kind of go over the differences. So right now, I am preparing for a powerlifting competition that's going to happen in the November 3rd, I believe is the date.
All right.
So I have been just maintaining, to be honest, my weight. I'm not too worried about cutting weight. I was cutting weight probably 4 weeks ago. And then when I was looking to sign up for my powerlifting competition, I realized that they changed the weight classes. So I was like, oh, my weight class used to top out at 148 pounds. And I kind of just naturally sit between 143 and 145 pounds. Like if I just like sit and do nothing and like don't track anything, I pretty much just eat that way. But I had jumped up to like 146, 147. And normally, since the top end was 148, I usually try to cut a little bit of weight down from that, just so I have a buffer when I go to weigh in or something.
Yeah, I think that's smart. And you were saying they changed the weight class now?
Yeah, so they changed it. So now the top end's 152 pounds.
Okay. So you don't have to worry about that so much anymore.
So I really don't have to worry about that as much. So I stopped cutting, and I was like, I'm just going to do maintenance. So for me right now, my maintenance calories come out to about 1,500 calories.
Yeah, so I was curious. Remind me, like, how old you are and what your current body weight are.
So I'm 31, and my current body weight is, this morning, it was 145.5 pounds.
Okay, cool.
So I'm right around there. And I kind of just, like, if I eat anywhere between 15 to 1,700 calories a day, I pretty much maintain that body weight.
Nice. And how tall are you, Amanda?
5'4".
5'4". Okay.
I'm a midget.
I wouldn't call that a midget. I think that's pretty average for a lady, isn't it?
I don't know. I always feel so small compared to everyone else. So.
Well, isn't your fiance like a giant? So
he's 6'3". Yeah, he's pretty tall. So I definitely feel like a midget next to him.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's see. 31, female, 145 and a half, 5'4". How often are you training?
6 days a week.
6 days a week. Oh boy. Mm-hmm. And training for powerlifting. So I'm going to call that intense training. Mm-hmm. Definitely intense. And you were saying maintenance wise, you're eating how many calories?
It's usually between 15 to 1,700.
I'm actually surprised. What I'm seeing here, based on like the calculator that I might use, that actually seems to be a pretty low estimate. This is suggesting your maintenance might be as high as 2,200, which is quite a lot more calories, actually.
It's quite a lot more calories. I haven't eaten that many calories in a while. Like, I will be honest, I don't know if you knew this, but I used to be very overweight. And I had lost 100 pounds in 2 years. So I have noticed that for me, it's usually pretty easy for me to put on weight, but it is very difficult for me to take off weight. Now I'll put on muscle very fast, but with that usually comes body fat.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, you know, coming from that history with your body weight, I totally get like not wanting to jump the gun on increasing calories a whole bunch. Before we even get into the macros, just hearing all that, I might think a long-term strategy for you, maybe not appropriate right now while you're, you know, prepping for your contest here, but maybe a long-term strategy would be to see if you can slowly increase your calorie intake over time and really monitor your body weight, you know, week by week, and see if you can hold off on gaining so much weight, but still sneak in some extra calories. I'm thinking from a perspective of, you know, if you have more fuel, you know, you're lifting heavy weights, you're trying to be, you know, a successful power lifter. The more fuel, the stronger you're going to be, right? So if you could maintain your weight and stay within, you know, your current weight range or for your weight class rather, I figure the more calories you eat, the better you're going to perform. So that's kind of like a big picture thing for me.
Yeah, and it's funny that you said that because I actually started doing that the past 2 weeks. Basically, kind of did like a reverse diet
Nice.
because I was fully aware that, like, you're totally right. My calories are very low for the amount of activity that I do. And it's mostly because when I have tried to up it to like that 2000 range, I'll gain weight rapidly. Like, I'd gain like 5 or 6 pounds in a week. It was pretty wild.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, hey, everyone's body is a little different. Everyone's metabolism is a little different, and body weight is constituted by bone density, organ weight, what's in your bowels, not just muscles and fat. I guess is what I'm trying to say. So everyone's a
Yeah.
little different in that regard. Um, I would say if you were to increase the calories, you said reverse diet. So if you're aware of that, then you're probably doing it pretty controlled and pretty slowly, which is obviously the best way to do it. But I'm thinking like super slowly. Depending on how disciplined you are with your diet. Like I'm not sure how consistent you are with the calorie intake you're getting on a daily basis. But if you were like say super consistent, I think you throw out what 1500, 1600.
Yeah, so I'm usually consistently between 1525 calories and 1585 calories.
Ooh, so
So they're
specific. I
like
like that.
really they're like really close together.
Okay,
And I weigh and track everything.
beautiful.
So I don't use my Fitness Pal. I used to. I actually found Carbon Diet Coach, which Lane Norton and his wife created.
Cool.
I actually prefer that one.
I haven't used that, but I imagine if Lane produced it, then it's got to be pretty good and probably more oriented toward a competitor. I would think someone who's a little more serious. But any way you slice it, tracking your calories, tracking macros, good stuff. So whether it's MyFitnessPal or Carbon, what's it called?
Yeah, they call it Carbon Diet Coach, and the reason I like it a little bit more is so they have you weigh every single day, and they take the average of that week.
Cool. Okay.
And what they do is they give you kind of like they'll give you your macros, but at the end of the week, when you go to the coach section and you do your check-in, it will show you the range at which it's acceptable, and then it will show you in color coded like red, yellow, green whether, and it will ask you, do you think you uh, fell into your macros, or do you think you tracked consistently? And if it doesn't show up as a color, it means that you were way out of the range. And if it shows up as green, it means you did a pretty good job.
I
And then it will
see.
even ask you for women, are you on your menstrual cycle? Because that can affect your weight as a woman. And at the end of it, it will, if you lost weight or gained weight or whatever your goal is, because it also gives you the goal of like, do you want to reverse diet? Do you want to lose weight? Do you want to gain muscle? And then it also gives you the option of, do you want to do vegan? Do you want to do keto? So it gives you all those options, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Definitely a lot better than MyFitnessPal. A little more generic
Yeah.
over there.
Now it does cost money. So like I did the $80 a year plan because I know I'm going to use it. So it just seemed like more effective than paying the 9.99 a month, I think is what it is.
Absolutely. I think that's really reasonable considering how advanced it sounds like it is. And it's pretty interesting stuff actually. I didn't know all about Carbon Diet Coach, so that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, and then so when you do your check-in, if you like say you lost more weight than you were supposed to because it asks you how much you want to lose per week, it will actually increase or decrease your calories for you and adjust your macros for you based on how your check-in went. So I
Yeah.
thought that portion's pretty cool.
Yeah, the fact that it's automatically scaling stuff based on your inputs, I mean, that's fantastic. That's what any good coach would do, right? So if
Right,
if
exactly.
I was tracking your diet and I was seeing everything you're eating on a daily basis, if I was getting really hands-on with it, yeah, maybe I would have you weigh in on a daily basis and really look at those trends and start to analyze it. But I mean, Lane Norton and I'm sure his team have like a wealth of experience that maybe you or I do not have. So I
Right.
think you're probably in good hands. So I'm not discrediting them at all. But you mentioned like 1525, 1585 is your range. So
Yeah.
just kind of going back to what we were saying, if you were to try to slowly increase your calories, whether or not Carbon Diet Coach is suggesting you do or not, if I were to do it on my own, I would just go so slowly. Like if you're currently doing
Yeah.
1525, 1585, oh, let's go 1550, like 1625, and like rock in that range for like a solid week or two. See what happens. I don't imagine you'd gain multiple pounds of body weight from such a small increase to your calorie intake, but who knows?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you. Like that was kind of my goal going into even trying to prep for this powerlifting competition, because the more calories I can get in without gaining a ton of weight, like the more strength I'm going to gain.
Absolutely.
Um, so that was like my mindset, and I'm glad you agree with it, because I was like, maybe if I can increase it 25, 30 calories or 50 calories, somewhere in that range, uh, in like every day for like that week. So like you were saying, since my range is 1525 to 1585, up it to like 1550 to 1625, and then if I don't gain any weight and maintain, then up it again the following week by that same increment. And then my goal was try to get around that 2000 calorie mark, without gaining excess weight by the time I hit my powerlifting competition.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I'd approach it. And slow and steady really is the best approach there. Giving your metabolism, giving your body a chance to kind of get used to that. And even if you do fluctuate with body weight a little bit, if you gain half a pound, you gain a pound, like you don't have to go red alert just, right away.
Right.
Give it some
Yeah.
time to settle, see how, your training is affected by it. Really, that's just the best approach. And kind of big picture stuff. I think too many people jump into playing around with their calories, and they make such extreme changes right off the bat, and they get some wild results. Like, oh, I lost 7 pounds in a week, and it's like, well, yeah, you dropped 1,000 calories from what you're eating, or like
Exactly.
you're eating
Yeah.
like 100 grams less carbs per day, and the water retention that you're not dealing with anymore. That's going to be a lot of weight lost on the scale. A lot of different things to consider there, but slow and steady definitely wins the race here.
Yeah, and for me, like I'm not even that concerned about how much I weigh. It's always been my body fat. So, like my goal is like if I could gain muscle and either lose some body fat or keep it about the same, I would be perfectly happy with that. Cuz right now I sit at about 19.5% body fat.
Yeah, and for a woman, I mean, that's it's pretty good, right? Like, I'm not
Yeah.
as familiar with the body fat percentages for females, and given like their amount of muscle mass and their shape and how they look, but that sounds like it's pretty low already for women, right?
Yeah, they would say like that's about normal range. Like most women nowadays, well, they would say the average woman is like 25, 27% body fat. And then if you're more in shape, it's somewhere between like 18 to 24% body fat.
Nice. So yeah, you're right in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Cool. Well, yeah. So we kind of went off on a tangent there, but before we even got into macros, I just wanted to talk about like maybe adding more fuel in if you could tolerate it. But I figure we beat that dead enough. So tell me about your macros. Like you're obviously very savvy and very educated on
Um,
all this. So I'm curious what you're currently running with.
So right now, my macros, it's 115 grams of protein, it's 55 grams of fat, and it's about 140 grams of carbs.
So what is that like? Almost what 30? Oh, here, let me put the macros.
I think it's
1,600 calories.
yeah, I think it's like a 30-30-40 split, I want to say. So like,
Okay,
I think it's 40% carbs, 30%
nice.
fat, 30% protein.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So yeah, if I put that in at 1,600 calories, it's like 160 grams carbs, 120 grams protein, 53 grams fat, something like that.
Something like that. I think I tweak the fat a little bit because I tend to have, if you give me like a little bit more fat, I don't get as hungry all day.
Nice.
And I tend to have a higher protein and fat meal, especially in the morning, because
Yeah,
it sets me up better for the day.
yeah, I think that's generally a good way to have the first meal. Seems to be almost like a hiking mentality. Like, oh, I'm going for a hike. I
Right.
want to fill myself up and just sustain. Not needing a big carb load right now.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I work out super early in the morning. So usually when I go work out, it's not my ideal. Like I would rather have one meal in before I go work out, but my schedule just doesn't allow it. So I usually end up working out on an empty stomach.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. When did that start happening? And did you notice a big change in performance, or like your mindset with and without the meal?
So I would say when I got my job working at a bank, which was in March. So it's only been about 3 months since that changed. I used to work out, like I would get breakfast in and then I'd go work out because I could be at work a little bit later. But then I wouldn't get home until like 7, sometimes 8 p.m. instead of, my 5:30 p.m. nowadays. So initially, it was hard to adjust to the schedule because I was getting up about an hour and a half to 2 hours earlier than I had been. So the first 2 weeks when I adjusted to the schedule, my workouts were not the best. Like I definitely felt tired. I definitely didn't feel like I was prepared to work out. I'd get I'd get frustrated because I felt like I was taking steps backwards basically in my workout. Once that 2 week period kind of like passed and I was able to adjust, my workouts were actually better.
Wow,
Like I'd go
interesting.
into the gym and I felt like really focused to work out, and it woke me up for the rest of the day. So I had a ton of energy the rest of the day because I would work out first thing in the morning and I'd work out super early.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, absolutely. And I would say that probably the best thing is when you work out that early, no one else is in the gym, so I never have to wait for equipment.
Oh yeah, yeah. Private gym access is a luxury, and you have to earn it. You have to get in there at like 3, 4 in the morning, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, oh, well, this part's cool. Like, I never have to wait for a squat rack ever. Like,
Yeah, that's helpful. Is streamline your workout, real efficient. Like,
exactly. But every
yeah,
once in a while on Friday, I'll work out with my fiance in the evening. So I will sometimes notice, especially if I'm like when I was testing my maxes, I decided to do it in the evening because I had more fuel in me and I knew it was going to be better. But when you do a powerlifting competition, you start lifting at 7 a.m. So I'm kind of mimicking more of like what I'm going to experience anyway.
and that's really awesome. And that's a whole other topic we can dive into, like really training specifically for what you're preparing for. In this case, an early morning powerlifting competition. If you were only lifting in the evening and then all of a sudden you're asked to hit those same numbers in the morning and you weren't used to it, obviously that might throw a wrench in your flow there. I was actually curious though, how do you feel about like the trade-off in working out in the evening on those Fridays with your fiance? You're more fueled, you have more food in you, so that helps. But it's also at the end of what I presume to be a work day, right? So maybe there's
Yeah.
some mental fatigue going on there, maybe some stress potentially. I always ask my clients that, like, do you prefer to work out early or do you prefer to work out later? Because it seems like a coin flip, really.
I would agree. It's definitely a coin flip. If you were to ask me months ago, I'd probably say I prefer to work out in the evening. But if you were to ask me now, I prefer to work out in the morning because you're right. Like at that point, I'm mentally exhausted, so it is more difficult for me to find the kind of the inner motivation to, let's say, if I have a heavy top set, to really push that heavy top set. Where when I wake up first thing in the morning, the only thing I'm thinking about is my workout. Like I'm not even thinking about anything else yet. I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about my dogs. Like I'm only focused on my workout and focused on what's my program today, what am I doing today, and then what's the goal of this workout. So nowadays, I definitely prefer to work out in the morning.
You're badass, Amanda. You're getting it done. I appreciate that. Something else I just wanted to say was working out fasted. I think for someone who's doing powerlifting or like a strength sport like that, maybe it's not as impactful to your performance working out fasted. But then I was thinking back to when I was really into bodybuilding, and if you're doing bodybuilding workouts, hypertrophy workouts, you're trying to get that blood flow, you're trying to get that pump. And I always felt like if I wasn't well fed, if I didn't have a good amount of water and sodium and carbs in my body already, I would just struggle to get a pump. So like I'm thinking if you're a power lifter working out fasted, maybe not such a big deal, not so detrimental. But if you're an aspiring bodybuilder, not getting that pump, I mean, what's the point of lifting, bro?
Exactly. Like, what are you doing, bro?
What are you doing, bro? No pump, no gains. I don't know. I don't
No
know if that's true,
gains.
but but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I used to do like more, bodybuilding style workouts, I would definitely not work out fasted.
Right.
I would just like, I wouldn't be able to do it. Nowadays with powerlifting, because it's much more on your central nervous system than anything else, as long as I didn't have dinner super early the day before, um, in which case I haven't if I was like fasting for like 16, 18 hours, it would definitely affect my workout because then I would feel drained, and to try to push like 95% of your max or something when you've been fasting for that long, it's not going to go that well.
Yeah.
Um, unless even if you're super hydrated, like I've tried it before and it hasn't worked out well, which is why for me intermittent fasting was not very successful. And I had tried it, but it just wasn't something that worked with my schedule and my workouts and everything. But if I have dinner at like 6, 7 p.m., or even like sometimes 5:30, because I go to bed at 9 and then I wake up at 4:30, I'm pretty good to go. So it doesn't affect me that much. And even when I had a meal in before my workout, I always waited an hour to an hour and a half before I would even go work out because I didn't want to feel like it's sitting in me.
Yeah,
Um,
very uncomfortable to feel that bloatedness and that kind of sloshing, not very sexy.
yes, exactly. And it made me feel more sluggish. So
Right.
the benefit of always working out fasted is I never get that feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Got some cool lighting action going on over there. See
And
that?
this damn ring light like wants to just randomly turn off. Like
It's okay. It looks good either way. Don't worry. It's teasing. Well, all right. So we looked at your macros a little bit, and I have to say, like, based on the numbers you said and the calories you're eating, I'm not sure that would really change much. I mean, you seem to be maintaining your body weight pretty good, so you're not actively trying to gain or lose. You're comfortable just kind of sitting where you're at. Do you have any plans on doing any sort of increase in calories, or dare I say, even like carb loading the days before your competition? Like, because you seem to have a few pounds of wiggle room, right?
Right. So usually the week to 2 weeks before my competition, I will increase my carbs anywhere from 50 to 100 grams.
Nice.
So it's quite a bit more. And surprisingly, I usually will not gain weight at all. Like actually, I'll weigh in the day before and I'll be a pound less somehow.
Interesting.
So I don't know why that happens, and especially because the week before is basically either an entire rest week or a very very mild like deload where I'm maybe lifting 50% of anything. Just because I want to be very fresh when I go into a competition, and that's always kind of worked for me. The week before, I do very little. Maybe I do some cardio just to get the blood flow going and do like 20 minutes a day or something like that. But usually, lifting wise, I'm very minimal the week before. And then 2 weeks before is when I'll start ramping up the carbs to try to get that energy back in. And usually 3 to 4 weeks before is when I'll do a slight test of my maxes just to see where I'm at. So I know what numbers I want to hit when I go actually into the meet. Because when you go into a meet, like adrenaline does take over at some point. And especially for me, when I'm deadlifting, I will always hit my deadlift way better in a competition than I ever do in training.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool. And it sounds like you really do have it broken down pretty well for yourself. Like you've competed before, right?
Yeah, this would be the fifth or sixth time I've competed.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
It has been like 2 years since the last time I competed, but the last time I competed, I did 3 competitions in a year, and I got first place in every single one of those competitions.
Nice. I didn't actually know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I still hold like a Wyoming state record. I hold 3 Colorado state records. I think I still have a Maryland state record. I would have to check that one,
Oh,
but
snap. I didn't know I was talking to a record holder. Wow. Excuse me.
But the biggest goal I have is I have yet to break a 300-pound squat. That's my big goal. I hit 295 was the highest I hit in a competition, so I was 5 pounds off. And I think I was actually lighter at the time. I think I was 140 pounds at that competition.
Oh, so you got to go for it this time, right?
Yeah, so like that's my big thing is I want a 300-pound squat. Like that's my biggest goal for this entire competition. I don't care if I red light every lift. Like I just want a 300-pound squat.
I don't know. Hearing you talk about this, I feel like you got it in the bag. I don't want to jinx it or anything, but
Oh
you
man, I
sound
hope so.
honestly, between the nutritional expertise that you have, the training discipline, I mean, what more could you possibly ask for someone who's, prepping for a contest like this? I think you're going to nail it.
Yeah, I hope so. That's why like I really don't like writing programs for myself because I end up overthinking it and I end up putting way too much volume in it that I don't need. So usually like I'll hire someone to write my program and just be like, "Look, just tell me what to do and I'll just follow it to a T."
Yeah.
And
Well, powerlifting is such a specific type of weightlifting. So, like, I have very little, I would say I have zero experience programming for someone who's competing in powerlifting. So I know those workouts look very different from, your Gen Pop workout or your bodybuilding type of workout. So, lower reps, of course, maybe a lot lower volume, and obviously very, very high loads. So, it's a very different experience. And I understand like not wanting to do it yourself. I think putting it in someone else's hands is a good call.
Yeah, so that's basically what I do is I just hire someone, write my program, and I'll just follow it.
Nice. Yeah. Hey, it's worked for you so far.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, yeah, I think just circling back, on the topic of your diet, the only thing I can say, is again, big picture, trying to slowly increase your calories, increase your fuel over time. You have plenty of time before your contest, so I feel like it's not exactly a bad time to try it. Like, you're not going to rock the boat too much and, oh no, I gained 10 pounds unexpectedly, and what do I do? My
Right.
contest is tomorrow. I don't think we're going to run into that issue. So if I was you, I would definitely try sliding that range up a little bit, whether or not Carbon Diet Coach recommends it or not, and just see, experiment with it and see what happens in, a 1 to 2 week period. Do you gain body weight? And if so, okay, you can hang out there. If not, creep it up a little bit more, creep it up a little bit more until you start to see some changes and, see how you feel in the gym.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. That was my goal, and I haven't done something like that in a long time. Would you say, have you ever had a client that you kind of did that with and saw a lot of success with?
So I would say no, because most of my clients are losing weight, right? So we're going in the
Okay, weight
opposite
loss, yeah.
direction. I have my cousin who I'm working with right now, and he's gotten into lifting for the first time really seriously in his life. He has physique goals. He's not really trying to compete in anything, not even bodybuilding. He just wants to look better and be a little bigger. And have him eating a surplus, and he's kind of tracking his macros. Not as seriously as you are, but he has a good baseline understanding of what he's eating, and he's been growing like a weed. It's pretty easy to grow when you first start out lifting, and for him,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
not quite at the stage yet where I need to like slowly increase his calories. Right now, he's like
Hmm.
in a comfortable surplus of like 500 plus calories. He's always like been like kind of an ectomorph, like leaner, scrawnier guy. Shout out John, and he can afford to gain some body fat. Like it's not a big deal for him. So, in his circumstance, not even there yet. But maybe one day, like I've even explained that to him, that long term, like you get to your kind of ideal body weight range. And then if you still want to keep growing without putting on a ton of fat, then yeah, you start to, I mean, I wouldn't call it reverse dieting, but you start to slowly increase those calories and basically see how much you can increase them by without gaining too much weight too quickly and just see where you fall.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I had one client that I did a reverse diet with, and it's because she was a bikini competitor for bodybuilding, and she had cut her previous coach had cut her all the way down to 900 calories a day.
Ouch. Oh,
Yeah, and I
man.
was like, "You're gonna die."
Yep.
So I was like, "We're gonna reverse diet." And I found her maintenance, and her mate. She was much smaller than me too. Like she was about 5'1", 5'1", 5'1" and a half. So she was a tiny girl. And her maintenance calorie was probably about 1,700 calories. So she still had a long way to go, almost twice as much as what she was eating. And it took us an entire year to get her back up to 1,700 calories.
And I really appreciate that you took the time and, kind of coached her through that process, because it's tough. Like someone in that position, they don't know who to trust anymore. They
Yeah.
had this one coach who told them this, and now you're telling them like almost the complete opposite. But at least you didn't have her jump right to it, right? You slowly brought those calories up, I assume, in a very, very gradual way. And I'm sure she's, very thankful at this point.
Oh yeah, like we did it. It was 25 calories, and we
Solid.
did that 25 calories a day for a week. And what I mean by that is I wasn't increasing 25 every single day. It was mostly like if she ate 900 calories, she was eating 925 every day for the next week.
Right.
And then we did it, progressively up from there. And she did gain like a little bit of weight, but in all honesty, she needed to. She needed to gain at least 5 pounds. So the 5 pound increase was not a big deal to her. The bigger thing was after we did the reverse diet, her metabolism like shot through the roof. And she was much happier. She wasn't like she had so many issues going into it where like her hair was falling out and her
Oof.
skin was really brittle. Like these are all things that I was telling her. I was like, all right, you need to understand that these are side effects of severe under eating. and this is not normal. Like, you shouldn't, even if you're doing a bodybuilding competition, you shouldn't have these type of side effects.
Yeah, 100% agreed. And, it's that kind of hardcore, extreme, like full throttle sacrifice mentality that I think people get into trouble with.
Yeah, and especially when they start competing in bodybuilding, I think it's super common. But yeah, reverse dieting I think is something that's overlooked, but a lot of people can benefit from it, especially if they're competitive in bodybuilding or any type of performance sport. They tend to go to the extreme, and it's just their personality. Like, usually that's why they're in the sport in the first place. That's why they do well in it. But that can obviously have a caveat, and it'd be a double-edged sword for you because it could hurt you in the long run.
Yeah, certainly. And, I would say not just people who are competing, but even, average Joes and Janes. I have a few clients that I work with who, they're middle aged, they're overweight, they have been for a while. They don't come from an athletic background, they're not used to lifting weights or in that fitness, bodybuilding scene. But I have them track their calories, and before I even start changing anything, I'm just kind of observing what they're eating. And yeah, I see some 800, 900 calorie days, and I'm like, "Ay, okay." So like, you start to look at their maintenance, and it's a lot more than that, and you start to figure out, okay, how can I explain this to this person, and have them be disciplined along that way. It's tough. It's very, very tough.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a good time to maybe jump into talking about micronutrients, because we talked about your calories and your macros, and maybe I'll use you as kind of the example here. Given that you're competing in powerlifting, and you're very focused on maintaining your body weight, or not letting it gain too much. How do you feel about micronutrients? Like, is that a big factor for you as a competitive powerlifter?
I personally think they're super important, but I think most people overlook them. So, me personally, I genetically have very low iron.
Hmm.
So I do take an iron supplement, because even though I try to eat foods that are very rich in iron, so I'll eat a lot of spinach, a lot of kale, those type of vegetables are what I mostly incorporate. A lot of broccoli and cauliflower, just because I like them. So like, those are the type of vegetables I try to incorporate because I know I have low iron. But even if I eat a ton of those, it's I still have to incorporate some type of supplement. And then I will say, when I eat protein, a lot of it is red meat usually. And I don't have any basis for this, but I just notice, especially when it's that time of the month for me, and I already have low iron, if I do eat red meat, I tend to feel better. My fatigue and my lack of energy doesn't tend to be as low when I have red meat like 2 or 3 times a week during that week, particularly.
Yeah, and on one hand, there's that higher creatine content in the red meat,
Hmm.
so maybe that's working to your advantage in terms of giving you a little more pep to your step. But I'm not certain. I thought that red meat did have more iron, per serving than, like, say, poultry or something like that. I'm not 100% sure.
It definitely does.
But
That's one of the reasons I incorporated it, but I know it doesn't have as much iron as, say, if you ate like a whole cup of spinach, or some vegetable. So, like, my basis of saying that is, I don't think it's necessarily the absolute best choice.
gotcha.
I try to get most of that from vegetables and supplement, but I just notice having that does help a little bit because it is higher in iron than, say, chicken or fish is.
Sure, sure. And I think that's an important point to mention, for women out there listening. If it is that time of the month, I mean, yeah, iron deficiency is very real. I think it is more common in females. Don't quote me
Yeah.
on that, but, it's something that I think is often overlooked, not only micronutrients in general, but iron specifically. Because, people are anemic walking around there feeling weak and tired, and it's like, oh, it doesn't need to be that way. That's not normal. And I was actually
Right.
curious, how did you figure out that you are genetically predisposed to having less iron?
So I know my mom has it. And I remember I went to get blood work done, and I mostly did it for our health insurance at work. If you do your blood work and it comes back, within normal range, they discount your health insurance because you're a healthy individual. So
Nice.
I always do it once a year because I want the discount.
Yeah, well, hey, that's a great incentive, but I think you should be doing it at least once a year.
Yeah.
Especially since you're very into your health and fitness. It's good data to have. And that's actually something I
Yeah.
wanted to talk about today was, as far as micronutrients go, maybe first we should talk about what micronutrients are. But one way in which you can determine if you're deficient or maybe consuming too much of a certain micronutrient would be through blood work, getting blood testing done. And for those listening, just go speak to your doctor. Just go get your normal blood panel done. But sometimes they don't test for all the things. Like as a vegan, I have to sometimes request like, hey, can you check my B12? Can you check my vitamin D? Can you check some of these other things that maybe they're not going to check unless you presented with some symptoms where the doctor thinks, maybe they're deficient in this. I'll test for that. I think it's good to just have that conversation with whoever your physician is.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like, you should definitely get your blood work checked out. Even if you don't have a family history of anything, even if you're not concerned of anything, sometimes it gives you a window into maybe why you have more fatigue, why you're more fatigued at certain times, or maybe why you're not sleeping as well. Like, even those little indicators can tell you a lot about what's going on the inside of your body. So I agree. You should definitely get it checked out. It's how I found out. One, I have low iron, and I also have very low blood pressure. It's very difficult for my heart rate to get up really high, and when it does, I recover very quickly, which is a great thing for working out. But it can cause me to feel sluggish at times, or have low energy, even though I eat pretty healthy and I work out regularly. I have to be very aware of those things and realize this is just something that I have, and I have to basically tailor my life towards making sure I don't feel that way.
Yeah, and it's good that you're very well educated on this. Not everyone is in that position where they know these things, and they're checking on these things regularly. So it's a good baseline to have, and certainly everyone's getting blood work done, but really thinking a little bit outside the box with your nutrition in mind. But micronutrients, right? So what are micronutrients, Amanda?
So your micronutrients, they kind of fall into two categories. So there's your fat soluble and your water soluble. So fat soluble means if you should consume them with some type of fat in order to absorb those nutrients. And where most people go wrong, and I've seen it a lot, is let's say they take a multivitamin and they don't eat something with it. So then they wonder why they're feeling nauseous after they eat their multivitamin. And it's usually those fat soluble vitamins, they got nowhere to go.
That's a great point.
Because you didn't give them anything to shuttle into your bloodstream.
Yeah, and it's cool of you to break that down with the fat soluble and water soluble. A very important point. Would you say it's a good general recommendation to just eat some food with your vitamins and your supplements and whatever you're taking?
Yeah. So when I was personal training and I had nutrition clients, I would always recommend, look, I recommend that you take your multivitamin with breakfast, or if you have it at night, eat it with dinner, to avoid feeling nauseous. And I would explain, the reason for this is half of your vitamins do get absorbed just through water, but the other half are fat soluble, and they're the ones that will make you nauseous because they have nowhere to go unless you eat some food with it. And I'm not saying you need to like load up on fat in order to absorb them. I'm just saying it needs some type of shuttle in order to get into your bloodstream. And those vitamins are A, D, E, and K. And the short version of that is ADEC.
Nice. I like that. And yeah, super important point, that you don't need to say take multiple tablespoons of coconut oil and have that with your vitamins. You can just eat pretty normally, right? Like any food that might contain a little bit of fat is probably sufficient for absorbing those vitamins and minerals.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, don't feel like you need to take a ton of food or something like that. It's just a little bit. That way, you can absorb those nutrients efficiently and not basically make yourself sick or anything.
Yeah, we don't want that. We want to be healthy and feel good. We don't want to be nauseous and in the bathroom.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, definitely don't want that. And I've seen it a lot, and people just are unaware of it. So that's why I think it's super important to make sure you take, especially those vitamins with some type of fat, but the rest of your vitamins are water soluble, and that's mostly all your B vitamins. So those are the water soluble vitamins, which means technically you can't overdose on those vitamins for the most part, because eventually you'll excrete them if you eat too much of them. Whereas the fat soluble vitamins, if you overdose on, say, those vitamins, you may get some negative side effects because of it.
Yeah, great point. Great point. I knew I came to the right place to discuss this topic, Amanda. You're the expert on this one.
Yeah, so your water soluble vitamins, like I was saying, is your B vitamins. So if you want the scientific name for them, the only one that's not a B vitamin is vitamin C, is water soluble. That one's the ascorbic acid, is the scientific one for it. Then there's thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, vitamin B6, and I'm not going to say the scientific one because it's like 4 different names. Uh, Folacine, vitamin B12, biotin, and pantothenic acid. So those are all your kind of water soluble vitamins. And basically, if you look at them on the back of a food label, thiamine would be your B1, riboflavin would be your B2, niacin would be your B3, pantothoic acid would be your B5. I don't know why they skip 4. I have no idea.
Yeah, science is peculiar at times.
Yeah, I was like, I always thought about that. I was like, why did you skip 4? Like,
Someone missed that class one day. I don't know.
yeah, but it's not the only one they skip. They skip B8 and they skip B10 and B11. There's none of those. Like,
Yeah, I wonder if it has to do with the chemical structure or something, you know?
that would be my guess, is how many carbons are made up in that molecule, and that's why they skip that number, is because it's based on the number of molecules that are in there. That would make sense, right?
That's like the only thing that my very, very primitive brain can think of right now.
Right? It's like, why would you skip that? But then pyridoxine, which is your vitamin B6, that's the most common chemical that it's called, but it can also be called pyridoxamine, and then it's like pyridoxal, and it's just a different enantiomer of a molecule. An enantiomer is basically the way it's flipped in in the air. So like, it's the same molecule, but it could be flipped upside down, it could be flipped sideways. So, but it's the same molecule, but because it can be moved in different directions, you have to have a name for each one of those directions.
Gotcha. Okay.
Which is pretty wild. And then B7 is your biotin, which a lot of people associate with like makeup products because it's supposed to be better for your skin, which is true. It does help with your skin. And then folate is your B9, which you would see a lot of that was added to cereals in the US because spina bifida used to be a big thing back in, I want to say, the 60s and 50s with babies. So technically, cereal is a genetically modified food, but not all GMOs are bad. So like, that's considered a GMO because it was added to the food, but it's to prevent spina bifida in babies.
Yeah, that's pretty important.
And then exactly, yeah. And then the last one is obviously B12, which most people associate with energy and how they feel.
Yes. Oh God. Remember that crazy YouTube video? What was it? That energy drink. We need Jupe for this one, but
Energy.
You know what I'm talking about. What is that called?
Yes.
Which one was that?
Oh my God. I don't know what they called it, but
Man,
they had like three separate, I know, they had 3 separate videos.
Yeah.
And it was like, try new flavors like gun.
Yes. Oh man. That's so
like,
good.
It's so funny though.
Yeah, I think that's the energy drink that Jupe needs to be sponsored by. I don't know, Rain. I don't know.
Dude, he does. Like, that's him 24/7.
Absolutely. Well, let me get us back on topic a little bit here with micronutrients, right? So we just broke it down so well, but let me ask you this. What makes micronutrients different from macronutrients?
So you usually don't need as high an amount of a micronutrient in your system on a daily basis. So let's say you need 100 grams of carbs. You may need only 10 milligrams or even micrograms of certain nutrients. Sorry, not nutrients, but vitamins in your body. So for example, like vitamin B6, you need like 10 micrograms of that to be suitable in your body. So it's not anything crazy that you're looking at, and that's why they're called micros, because you need such a smaller quantity compared to your macronutrients, which you need much larger quantities of on a daily basis.
Right. Yeah, that is a great point. Yeah, it's basically trace amounts compared to those hundreds of grams you might be having of those macros. Now, what about the role that macronutrients play as opposed to micros? Like when we're talking about macros, we're often talking about calories, right? So
Right.
I
Yeah.
think a lot of our listeners might appreciate knowing that macronutrients are what's providing you with energy, in the form of calories into your diet. But those micronutrients we're talking about, those vitamins and minerals, they're not really providing you with energy in the form of calories. They function, they perform a specific role in the body. I'm sure Amanda can, elaborate for us because I'm not as well versed in that. But a little bit different, right?
Yeah, so a lot of the micronutrients are either precursors or they themselves help with the reception of your macronutrients and shuttle them through your bloodstream to be used in different parts of your body. So, for example, you need iron in your blood because that's the one that carries oxygen and it's the one that takes oxygen from different parts of your body to make sure you get enough oxygen in your brain and your heart and in your lungs to function properly. So, if you're low in iron, it's one of the reasons you feel so basically fatigued. Most part, you're just not getting enough oxygen throughout your body. And if you think about it in terms of like working out, if you weren't getting enough iron and you go try to work out, you're expending tons of energy and you're trying to pull in as much oxygen as you can. And you're just not being very efficient because you just don't have enough iron in your blood to carry that oxygen that you're trying to receive.
Yeah, that's a great point. So these micros, they are very important. It turns out, people who are overlooking them, you may be missing out on these, hidden physiological benefits that they bring to the table. Whether it's giving you more energy and oxygen, to the certain parts of your body, or can you give another example that's not based on iron, like another micronutrient that has some very significant role for us?
Yeah, so let's take one of the fat soluble micronutrients. So, like vitamin D is especially important for brain function. It's important for healthy skin, and it affects a lot of the things that you use on a daily basis. Like, if you don't want to suffer from skin conditions later on in life, if you feel like your skin is either really dry or really oily, that could be a sign that you're deficient in vitamin D, and you're basically not producing enough melanin in your skin to give it the proper tone and elasticity that you need for looking like, let's say, I used to tell my older clients like that want to look younger, especially women, take more vitamin D. Your skin will look healthier, and in effect you will look younger just because your skin looks better.
Nice. That's a good tip. That's a nice one. Now, when we talk about how can we make sure we're getting enough micronutrients in our diets, we mentioned earlier, like, getting blood work done and doing blood testing. But let's say you get your blood tested and your doctor says, oh, turns out you're a little deficient in, say, vitamin D. What would you recommend someone who's deficient in something?
So I would always recommend first try to incorporate more foods that will help you with that vitamin. So like vitamin D, a lot of citric fruits will have high contents of vitamin D. A lot of dairy products have high contents of vitamin D. So incorporating more of those into your diet should help with that. Going outside more, especially for vitamin D. I know it's hard during these times, but let's say once we get past these times and we can go outside more freely, then you should be outside and in the sun more than sitting inside and watching TV. Even simple as going for a 30-minute walk in sunshine every single day can increase the amount of vitamin D that you have in your bloodstream.
Right, and vitamin D would be unique in that regard, right? Like,
Right,
you know,
exactly.
that's probably one of the only micronutrients that is, produced internally by exposure to UV light.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And then if that still does not help or fix the issue, then I would look at adding a multivitamin. And I always look at a multivitamin as an insurance. I always think you should get most of your vitamins and minerals through food. But if you can't, a multivitamin is kind of your insurance to make sure at least you're getting the minimum of those vitamins and minerals.
Nice, cool, cool. Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you just said. On the topic of getting these micronutrients from your diet, now I have here some notes that we wanted to cover. We want to talk about nutrient density when it comes to the foods that we're eating, and on the topic of getting these vitamins and minerals into the diet. Well, you might have just learned from Amanda that certain foods have certain higher concentrations of specific vitamins and minerals. So she mentioned, citric fruits have more vitamin D than others. So it pays to be a little bit educated and informed on what foods contain what micronutrients. So if you're lacking in a specific one, you're of course going to need to seek out those food groups that are giving you that same specific micronutrient.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, things like MyFitnessPal and different tracking apps, when you input food, they do actually track your micronutrients as well. So you can see if you're overeating on a certain micronutrient and severely undereating on another, which I think is important. And then if you find that you're consistently undereating a certain micronutrient, you could do even just a simple Google search asking, you know, what foods are high in iron, what foods are high in vitamin B12, and you'll find very common lists that share similar foods, or even sometimes the exact same foods that they recommend that you eat in order to help get more of those micronutrients. So it doesn't even have to be super complicated. It would just be, you know, I would say pay attention to it for a week and really track, and, you know, don't try to adjust it, let's say, but just find out where you're sitting at, so that way you can see, okay, my eating habits kind of consistently give me, let's say, low vitamin D or vitamin E, just based on the foods I eat. So I need to change a couple things to make sure I get more of this vitamin in my system.
Yeah, I think that that's awesome advice there. Just, sitting back, observing what you're currently eating, and then go from there, maybe alongside that blood work we were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Blood work especially is important. It's a quicker way to see where you're at. And then sometimes even your doctor can recommend, like, hey, this is what I've seen other people do in your situation to help get this vitamin up and make you feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we mentioned nutrient density. So, just to kind of break that down for some people, it turns out that if all you eat is white bread, you're not getting so many nutrients in your diet. And it may be fortified, right? It may be, enhanced, genetically modified to have some vitamins and minerals there. But some foods are a little bit more nutrient dense than others. They have higher concentrations of more vitamins and minerals than other, empty calorie foods might have. And then they have the topic of superfoods, right? So maybe you've heard this tossed around a little bit, listeners out there. What is a superfood? A superfood is essentially a very, very high nutrient dense food. It may also offer some specific micronutrients that are perhaps unique to that food. One example that comes to mind, I'm a big fan of Dr. Rhonda Patrick. She talks about sulforaphane in broccoli sprouts, not whole broccoli, like normal broccoli that people are eating as a vegetable, but specifically the sprouts. So when it first starts to grow, a broccoli plant, it is a little sprout, and it has an extremely high concentration of what's called sulforaphane, and that's just one very unique micronutrient. It's not your typical vitamins or minerals that we were talking about earlier, but you have these superfoods out there that I think are important to incorporate in the diet, just to ensure that you are getting, again, a high concentration of these vitamins and minerals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good point. Like, try to educate yourself more and listen to people that have high levels of education in this. Like, I know a good amount, but I also know that there's other people that know way more than me. And they're usually the people that I listen to try to get more information. Like, I'd mentioned Lane Norton. He's someone that I followed from ever since I was freaking in middle school. And he used to write like little forums on bodybuilding.com, and he has his PhD in nutrition. So he's someone I know that is way above me and knows a lot more and continues to do research in his field. So he's someone I rely heavily on if I'm looking at, like, hey, is this information that I recently read, is this true or false type thing. So, always try to find resources that may be able to push your thinking a little bit, but also kind of challenge the way that you look at eating and look at your healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an important point. Here at a Make Fit podcast, Amanda, Jupe, and I, we know some things, we know some stuff, yeah.
Know
But
some stuff.
I don't call myself a doctor because I'm not, and I don't have a
Mhm.
PhD in nutrition like Lane Norton or Rhonda Patrick do. So they're definitely the people we yield to and pull from. So anyone who's out there, go check them out too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, what else do we have here, Amanda? We covered your diet. We covered micronutrients. Hmm. Now we had a whole other topic, but I don't know if we should go into it since I think we're coming to a close soon. What do you think?
I think we could do it.
I think we can do it. Okay.
I think we should knock it out.
I'm down. I'm down. So then the next area that we'll be covering more on me being a vegan and how to safely eat a vegan diet. And we just finished talking about micronutrients and how you could be deficient in them or maybe be eating too many of them. And when it comes to eating a plant-based or vegan diet, maybe you've heard that there are actually quite a few nutrient deficiencies in a vegan diet. And let's kind of list some of those out there for you now. Oftentimes, someone on a vegan diet, they may be lacking in vitamin B12. They may be lacking in choline, vitamin K2, iodine, iron, Amanda mentioned that earlier, vitamin D3, creatine, omega-3 fatty acids, and this isn't a micronutrient, but a macronutrient, protein. And, hearing that long, exhaustive list there, you might be wondering, well, why the heck would anyone want to eat a vegan diet? Well, there's a lot of reasons to go vegan and, eat plant-based. We won't get into that right now. But in terms of the nutrition deficiencies, now, fortunate for us, we have supplements. And as someone who is a vegan actively and has been for like 5 years now, supplements are really important. When I first got into this, I didn't actually know all about these nutrient deficiencies. So I kind of was just eating a plant-based diet pretty blindly. I didn't really have any unpleasant side effects or issues, but eventually I started reading and educating myself, and I saw this exhaustive list, and I thought, oh boy, okay, like maybe I should dot my I's and cross my T's. So then I realized, oh, well, that organic soy milk I was drinking, well, that's already fortified with B12. And it has like a whole bunch of calcium and other things added in it too. So I didn't even realize that some of the foods I was currently eating were already offering me some of these missing nutrients, which I thought was pretty nice that they are included in a lot of these plant-based foods by default. Makes it a little bit easier to eat vegan these days. But some specific ones that I had to kind of go out of my way to get, vitamin K2 and vitamin D3. A lot of vitamin D3 is animal-based.
Yeah.
Even like the supplements, sometimes they're grown on like cultures of animal-based cells and animal-based products. So you can get vegan vitamin D3 in the form of like an algae supplement, where like lichen, I think it's called, or lichen.
Yeah.
Right. So once I discovered that, I was all for it. And then there's creatine supplements, and there's all these other plant-based supplements that can help you counter these deficiencies. So for anyone who's listening and maybe was thinking, oh, I want to try plant-based, but I don't know, I heard some bad things about those missing nutrients. Rest assured, you can certainly eat a safe and healthy vegan diet, but you do have to be careful and monitor your blood work and possibly be taking supplements. I would say definitely be taking supplements, specifically for something like vitamin D3 and K2.
Now, did you find that were you able to find something that, it's an all-in-one supplement that you can kind of take, or did you have to like break it up and find different places that kind of fit the nutrient that you're missing, and then you ended up taking like 6 or 7 supplements in the morning or something like that?
Yeah, so I'm not currently taking a multivitamin, and I've wanted to look into a vegan-friendly, multivitamin for a while now. I like to think I am getting a good amount of these micronutrients from my diet. But I do have like a good 6 or 7 supplements I take, and they're individual supplements. So every day I'm taking a vitamin D3 supplement, I'm taking the vitamin K2 supplement, I'm putting creatine in my protein shakes, I'm taking choline, iodine. Iodine you can get through salt if you're eating iodized salt. So I am just getting it from there. Iron, I do get some leafy greens in there, and I haven't had any issues with my blood work. I just had my blood work done recently, so all good, guys.
Nice.
No worries. Omega-3s, I am taking algae oil, omega-3 fatty acid supplement, and I eat a ton of avocado, and I use avocado oil as my cooking oil of choice. So it is kind of a roundabout approach. There probably is a plant-based multi that would, cover a lot of these things for you. So I just happen to take that approach. I'm not recommending it necessarily overtaking the multi, but I haven't done my research on the multis.
Yeah, I know I've seen some vegan multivitamin supplements in like Whole Foods, and I don't know if Jersey has Sprouts yet, but there's like it's somewhere between a Trader Joe's and a Whole Foods, and it's very common out here that kind of sell vegan specialized multivitamins. I haven't really looked at the back of them, but I have seen that they do sell them. So hopefully it's a pretty good option and something that could help you down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I have no doubt that they exist, and I'm sure there are some that are better than others. So that'll be something I have to look into in the future. But so far, so good. I think if someone was just getting into it, probably taking the multi is the best approach, just for simplicity's sake. But you can do these separate vitamins if you choose to.
Yeah, exactly. And I know a lot of people, the first thing they think of in a vegan diet is the last one you mentioned, which is, oh, vegans never get enough protein. And, I think that's kind of false advertising. I think what it really is a lot of the high protein sources in a vegan diet usually do have a lot of carbs and other macronutrients associated with them, which ups the calories of them.
Yeah.
Have you found some sources that are really good, and that you would recommend other people try that are trying to switch to a vegan diet?
Yeah, so to your point of, maybe it's not justified to say that vegan diets are low protein, they certainly can be. And I definitely have known people who have recently, switched over to plant-based who that is a struggle for them. They're tracking their macros and gosh, they're getting very low protein, way less than they were when they were an omnivore. And
Hmm.
it doesn't need to be that way, of course. Like there are vegan proteins, and I'll list out some for you right now. We have lentils, chickpeas, beans, and other legumes, which are all very carb heavy, as Amanda was alluding to. But they do offer a substantial amount of protein per serving. But some of your more concentrated protein sources, of course, you have soybean, which that's its own type of legume, but specifically in the form of tofu, tempeh, which is fermented soybean, very tasty too. Edamame, which you probably have eaten if you've ever been to a sushi joint. Very, very tasty, high protein snack. And specifically with the soy and the soybean, I just want to let everyone know you really want to get organic soy. Sometimes the whole organic thing gets blown out of proportion. Certain foods it's more important for than others. But due to the way that they're cultivated, they tend to have a lot of pesticides used on non-organic soybean crops. So that
Right.
is a concern for someone like myself or someone who's vegetarian or vegan. If you are eating a lot of soy, you're going to want to make sure that that's organic soy just to kind of avoid all those probably carcinogenic things that you don't want floating around in your body. Aside from that, we do have a couple others. Vital wheat gluten, also known as seitan, or seitan, depending on how you want to say it. But vital wheat gluten, yes, that's gluten. So if you're a person who is gluten intolerant, don't eat it. Wouldn't be so great for you because it's concentrated wheat gluten. You can get these things like prepared in the store already, like kind of prepped for you, or you can actually get vital wheat gluten powder, or I'm sorry, flour, and you can actually make your own seitan at home. It's just flour like wheat flour, but it is the concentrated protein gluten from that wheat flour. So it handles a little bit differently, but you can cook it at home and very, very high protein if your stomach can tolerate it. And aside from that, you do have peas. So, like green peas that people are familiar with are actually pretty high protein. Again, there's the carbohydrates that come with them, but a lot of times you'll find in vegan protein supplements like protein powders, protein bars, stuff like that. A lot of them are getting the protein from green pea powder, which is a very cheap and affordable form of vegetarian protein. But I suppose one of the caveats to all these sources of protein is that if you are eating only vegetable based proteins, they're not as bioavailable as animal based proteins. And I think this is something we covered in the last episode we did together. I maybe mentioned it briefly, but vegetarian proteins aren't as good at being protein, for lack of a better word, than animal-based proteins. So let's say, talking about macronutrients, I think Amanda's goal was what we have here, 120 grams.
115.
Oh,
Yeah, or
115.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so if Amanda's eating all animal-based proteins, sure, 120, 115 grams, that will work. If she was eating 100% vegetarian proteins, you may want to increase that number by a large margin, perhaps as much as like 50% or more. So if we're eating 120, that might bump up to like 180 to 200 grams. And protein's protein, so that is a lot of extra protein that you have to get in. And as we were discussing already, like vegan diets aren't exactly chock full of protein unless you're going out of your way to get that protein. So that's something I'm always conscious about. And anyone who asks me for help in building a plant-based diet or transitioning to being vegan, it's all about the protein, as it often is in fitness,
Hmm.
in health. Right? We need that protein, and it's lacking in vegan diets. So you have to make sure you get some of these foods that we've mentioned.
Yeah, that completely makes sense, and I know a lot of people struggle with getting the right sources of protein, and they try to follow macros as if they were eating animal based. And you're completely right that bioavailability is not there. So even though the grams that you may be getting is the correct amount, the actual amount of protein that you're absorbing and that your body can use is not the same. So you really do, just like I would say with anything else, you really do have to pay attention to the quality of the food that you're eating to really get the best out of your diet and basically equal better performance in whatever that you're doing.
Yeah, and I think for someone who's just trying to be healthy or get a balanced diet together, they're not competing in powerlifting, they're not an aspiring fitness athlete. For them, just getting that standard amount of protein might be enough, even if it is vegetarian protein. But once you kind of get into the realm of performance, then you do need to take it a little bit more seriously, and you may want to scale your protein intake up. But for someone who's just trying to lose some weight, if they were eating even just 100 to 120 grams of protein, all from vegetarian sources, maybe that only counts as 60 to 80 grams of animal-based protein, but maybe that's adequate enough to get them losing weight and generally maintaining muscle mass and maybe building a little bit of strength if they're new to strength training. But obviously, they're going to want more protein if they're taking it more seriously.
Now, you had spoke about, when we're talking about the bioavailability of protein and how you may even want to increase your macros up to 50% of what your protein is. I know you may not be tracking right now, but have you looked at, how you used to eat when you were a meat eater and how your macros have changed compared to now that you switched to a more vegan diet?
Yeah, certainly. So definitely my protein has decreased. My carbs have increased. I've always been pretty friendly to eating carbs, especially when they're, these very, very nice, robust vegetarian carbs like lentils, chickpeas, legumes, stuff like that. You're getting so much fiber in a very good way that
Hmm.
everything feels very hearty. Like I don't feel like super hungry compared to when I was eating an animal-based diet. But certainly, if I were to track, I would expect to see my carbs be up by a significant margin and my protein be down by a significant margin. And as far as tracking them, if I was to track them and if I was trying to scale my protein intake up, yeah, that's gonna skew my macros quite a bit. And to be honest, I haven't done that in a very serious way just yet. Like I haven't been pursuing a specific fitness goal, so I haven't been tracking. But if I were to, that would be something I pay particular attention to.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. That's the only thing I wondered is like, how much would that change for you? And like, let's say you had a client that was doing bodybuilding and they have eaten animal products their whole life and now they want to switch to a vegan diet. How much of that would you change? And do you think their macros would look significantly different compared to when they're eating animal products?
I think if they were just transitioning now and they were already, tracking calories, tracking macros, I might start by just trying to replicate their pre-existing macros, not change the boat too much or rock the boat too much. From
Hmm.
there, I'd see how their physique changes and is affected by this. Because, yeah, if it's less bioavailable protein, it's possible that they might, not be building muscle as readily or God forbid, lose muscle. That's like blasphemy in
Right.
fitness community. We don't want to be losing muscle. So, certainly we wouldn't want that to happen. And if necessary, if we needed to increase their protein intake, we would. But like I mentioned, a lot of those protein sources do come with carbs. So in that case, the solution would then be finding these more pure protein sources. So out of all the ones I mentioned, your soy products like tofu, tempeh, edamame, those are definitely more heavy on the protein and I believe the fat side. They don't carry as many carbohydrates per serving as like lentils and chickpeas do. Vital wheat gluten, also like almost pure protein. And then protein powders, even if the protein source coming from peas, it's a protein powder. So they make it like a typical protein powder that, you or any other person might be used to consuming, where it's per serving 20, 25 grams of protein and, very minimal amounts of fat and carbs. So it can be done, but you may end up eating a lot of these, there's only so many protein sources, right? So you may end up eating a lot of
Right.
these same foods, which I guess anyone who's taking fitness and protein intake seriously, they're already used to eating like a ton of lean protein, like, chicken and turkey and, tilapia and then protein powder. So it's not so different from that approach, but you do need to know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think that helps a lot of people to know that, hey, you can find decent protein sources. It's just you may have to look a little bit harder for them.
Yeah, and some of the ones I mentioned, like the legumes, lentils, chickpeas, beans. The great thing about a plant-based diet is that it can be very affordable. You don't need to be buying these prepackaged foods at the grocery store, all branded out. You just get a big old bag of dry lentils, dry chickpeas, dry beans. That can last you multiple pandemics worth of time. Let me tell you, you can just live off of that stuff. You're getting a ton of carbohydrates. You're getting a ton of protein. You have that over some quinoa or some, brown rice. You're good to go. I mean, like, it's just incredibly nutrient dense food, and it's dirt cheap. It's one of the hidden benefits, I think, of eating plant based and even just a vegetarian diet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a misconception people have is, isn't a vegan diet more expensive because some of the stuff is novelty. And so they hike up the price because the ingredients are more expensive to make it this way. So am I going to end up spending a ton of money to go vegan? And that's not necessarily the case. You could end up even saving money sometimes by eating a vegan diet.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a great point. And if you're eating those designer foods, like you said, like if 100% of your protein's coming from Beyond Burger, then yeah, it's going to be a little costly. More costly than just buying meat and eating meat? Probably not. But
Yeah.
you could save money if you wanted to eat more, of these whole foods, these lentils, chickpeas, and other legumes. One more point on the protein, though, something that I didn't mention is not only are these vegetable proteins, less bioavailable. Well, part of the concern there is actually that, as far as I know, all these vegetable proteins, none of them contain what you would call a complete amino acid profile. So
Hmm.
this is also one of the concerns where, oh no, like if I'm eating only vegetable proteins, does that mean I'm never getting those essential amino acids? And that's not actually true. That's not actually the case. What you need to do is mix and match. So, for example, if all of my protein in my diet was coming from one vegetable source, then I'm going to be deficient in some of these amino acids. These, probably the branched chains, I imagine, are the ones that you're missing. But if you combine things, for example, if I have a serving of lentils or like curry or dal over quinoa, well, I'm getting some protein from the quinoa that maybe is a different amino acid profile from the lentils. So suddenly I have two different amino acid profiles kind of overlapping, and that could potentially form a complete amino acid profile. So as long as you're mixing and matching throughout the day, you generally should be okay. I'm certainly not an expert on like exactly the amino acid profile of each of these vegan proteins that I've mentioned, but that's the gist of it as far as I know. In that you just don't want to stick to one source. You do need to mix and match. Whereas if you were eating animal based, like you could just only get your protein from all chicken or all beef, and you'll be fine because those are providing you with all the amino acids necessary.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And there is, certain amino acids that are considered essential amino acids. And there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 9 essential amino acids. Some people think there's a 10th one, because they'll include one of them that is a little less essential than the other ones. But what Steve's saying is basically you make complementary proteins and you have to mix and match like he says. So like one of the prime examples and the easiest one for people to understand is beans and rice.
Yes.
So I always get it mixed up, but one of them is missing the amino acid histidine, and then one of them is missing the amino acid methionine. But when you eat them together, they complement each other because the amino acid that one is missing, the other has. So when you eat them together, then you have a complete protein.
Exactly, and that is the perfect example. I'm sorry that slipped my mind. Rice and beans, right?
No, you're good.
We all know rice and beans, and who knew it was such a match made in heaven?
Yeah, and there's a lot of proteins that are like that come from plant-based sources that you can create a complete protein profile with. It's just you may have to basically do a little bit of research and figure out, well, if I'm missing these amino acids from my main protein source, what, let's say, even it could be a carb source like rice or something like that, does this make up for the rest of those amino acids? In which case, I'll just eat it together and then I have a complete protein.
Yeah, and I'll admit that I'm honestly not too stressed about that as I go through my day of eating. Like, I know I'm eating a variety of these vegan proteins. You know, in any given day, I'm having protein powder, green peas, I'm having soybean, I'm having black beans, I'm having lentils and chickpeas. Like, it's very common for me to have all those in the same day, in which case,
Hmm.
like, I'm just kind of making the assumption that there's that overlap and that harmony that Amanda so carefully described just a moment ago. So I haven't had any issue with it. I don't feel like I'm wasting away every day. I feel like I still have a decent amount of muscle from when I used to eat animal based foods. So I'm chilling.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, these are things that you should be aware of, but some people hear these things and are like, "Oh, well, I'm not doing plant based," and like that's a deal breaker for me. And it really doesn't have to be. Like, I feel like some of these things
Yeah.
are sometimes overblown, and I don't want to give the listeners the wrong idea that, like, oh, be careful. Like, be careful as in just know about it, like learn about it, and take a moment to assess your diet. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are pretty health conscious, I imagine. So if you are, then you're going to do this stuff anyway. So plant based can be done. I've been doing it for like 5+ years, and many have done it before me. So it's possible.
Yeah. So my advice would be, don't be afraid to try it. Like, it's okay if it doesn't go perfectly well the first month or 2 months that you're doing it. It's all a learning experience. But maybe you feel better doing it, and if that's the case, that's what matters really. Is, do you feel better eating this way? And if you do, then stick with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think that's everything, isn't it?
That's pretty much everything. I had some other things. If you want to keep riffing, I got some stuff.
Oh yeah, what do you got? Hit me.
I'll hit you. I hit you. One thing we were talking about before with your macros and tracking calories and all this stuff. You mentioned weighing things. So you talked about weighing the foods you're eating, and obviously you're using a food scale to do that.
Yep.
So I'm not sure if you and Jupe have talked about this in the past before I joined you guys, but food scales are really important, by the way. If you're trying to track your macros and track your calories really accurately, that's the best way to do it instead of guessing, right? Because
Yeah.
most people are just kind of guessing unless everything you eat is having a specific serving size, prepackaged food that tells you, oh, if you eat everything that's in this box right now, you get X amount of calories, X amount of macros. Otherwise, if you're kind of freewheeling and mixing and matching and cooking at home, you're going to want that food scale. But the reason I'm bringing it up is when it comes to working with my clients and helping them get a hold of their diet, I try to get everyone to track in MyFitnessPal 100%. But a lot of people are apprehensive to take it to the next step and start using the food scale. That always seems to be more reserved for the hardcore clients, the people who they really want to get their hands dirty, get down to the nitty gritty, and honestly get the best result. And I advertise it as such that you will get the best result if you're tracking your food and measuring things out. But in addition to using MyFitnessPal and tracking, the actual food they're eating, there's another thing that I talk about, and that is meal plans. And I believe you have some experience, maybe designing or making meal plans for clients of yours. I just want to ask your opinion. Like, what do you feel is the best approach if you were working with, say, a novice client, or maybe counter that with someone who's more experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, and this answer may surprise you, is it depends on the person and their personality. So I can give you an example of, I know some people are very black and white, and it's like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Those people perform very well with just a structured meal plan where they have to eat the same things basically every single day. They don't have to think about calories, they don't have to think about macros. I already did that for them. And they just follow it to a T, and that works really well for them because they are very like, it's this and it's not that. But I would say most people, I would say that type of person is a very type A person. They're very self-driven, they're very motivated, and basically they just need the roadmap. Give me the roadmap and I'll follow it. And I can fall into that category a lot of the times, especially when it comes to my workouts. I am very much that way. Like, give me the roadmap and I'll just follow it. But I think most people need some type of flexibility, and do not do very well with so much structure. It causes them anxiety and stress. And those people tend to be a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more reserved, and it may have yo-yoed in the past with their weight and dieting. And you have to be very aware of the type of person that's sitting in front of you. So with those people, I would do more of a flexible dieting where I give them macros and I give them calorie basically targets to hit, but it's within a range. And as long as they're within that range, you can eat what you want. And I think those type of people, they start to learn portion size, structure with their eating, and basically learn that, like, hey, there's certain foods that I do actually have to not eat as much of. Otherwise, I go way over my calories or way over my macros. So I really kind of tailor it to what type of person is sitting in front of me and what is the path of least resistance for them.
Yeah, I think that was so well said. That was fantastic, and I 100% agree. I only mention it because with my business with Feel Think Fit, I do offer people either option. Oh, we can just give you
Mhm.
calories and macros, and it can be super flexible, and you can just figure out what works for you. Or we can do a meal plan where, exactly as you said, the macros and the calories are already factored in. So if you just followed this roadmap, you hit 100% of your goals every single day, no matter what. But what I found sometimes is a solution for people is sort of like a hybrid system, which it may not work great for some because it could add confusion or just kind of uncertainty, but kind of doing a little bit of both, where I'll provide clients with the meal plan that, yes, it has their calories and their macros kind of factored in, and they're able to see those meals and different ingredients and everything broken down for them. But then I still have them tracking in MyFitnessPal whether or not
Mhm.
they are eating that meal plan 100%. And what I find it's helpful for is for those people who are kind of halfway toward being so disciplined and regimented as you were describing, where, oh, I mostly eat the same things, but every once in a while, I kind of want some variety, and they want to go out to eat, and they have this thing that's not on the meal plan. Well, okay, track it as to the best of your ability, see how it fits into your macros. Maybe it doesn't work that day. Okay, we learned something. But the meal plan can also sometimes serve as kind of a resource where it just gives them ideas as to what might be a good fit for them in their diet to hit their macros. So if they're kind of building it on their own using MyFitnessPal, like they're not really tracking the meal plan 100%, but it's more of a reference for them. Oh, what do I eat for dinner? Well, let me check the meal plan. I have like 7 days worth of dinners there that I can pull from, and maybe it won't fit their macros perfectly for that day, but it's like a decent meal. It's generally
Right.
a well balanced meal that they can pull from. And I was just curious to hear, like, what you have done in the past. But yeah, I think we're on the same page with that.
Yeah, I try to be flexible with the client because my biggest mindset with any client is I need the path of least resistance for them because I need them to stick to it long term. And most of the time, when they come to you, at that point, they've tried a lot of different things and they haven't been successful. And it's mostly that consistency that they're lacking. So I try to find, like, hey, what is going to work best for your personality type that you will actually stick to this. And I try to not do the opposite of that because if I do, you're just going to end up in the same kind of frustrated realm that you've been in for either the past month or year or however long it's been that you've tried to either lose weight or gain weight or whatever that goal may be.
Yeah, yeah, and I think tailoring it to the individual, right? Like you said, looking at who's in front of you and kind of gauging that before you decide what's the best approach. I want to throw you a curveball now. So the curveball is with a meal plan. Now, we were talking about eating the same foods on a recurring basis as though it's kind of this very static thing. Now,
Mm-hmm.
some of the meal plans I provide, they do allow for you to customize it pretty in depth. And one of the things you can do is you can actually make selections based on, oh, I want the meal plan to focus 100% on them hitting their macros, which is certainly my preference for myself and as a coach. Um,
Right.
but sometimes people get bored of eating the same foods, but yet they still want the meal
Mm-hmm.
plan. They still want to use the meal plan, but they're tired of eating the same foods and the same meals. So I was wondering how you feel about variety in a meal plan, and if you feel that that almost defeats the purpose of kind of having that roadmap, or if you could see it maybe working for some people.
I could definitely see it working. I've done something similar where I do write them, let's say 6 or 7 different meals for each meal of the day. But then and I'll do it in a calendar format. and I'll just be like, you can go through the calendars and pick the meals that you like. But what I'll also do on top of that is I'll make a table, and I do carb sources, protein sources, fat sources. And I give them the portion size that I recommend, the calories, fats, and proteins for that portion size. So then they have the option of actually switching out particular foods. So let's say I have a meal that is, let's say, something pretty simple, like it's like, eggs and toast. Well, let's say they want an omelet instead. What they can switch out is basically for the carb sources, they may put, like I have put shredded potatoes. There's a brand called O'Brien that they make just plain potatoes, but they pre-shred them for you. And it's just in a bag that you can cook up. So they may switch it out for something like that because they don't really feel like toast, but they still need to hit their carb sources. I'll make sure it's portioned out on the chart to be exactly the same carbs as was in the toast. So that way they're still within their macronutrients. Their calories may be a little bit different, but their range of macronutrients is within 10 grams. So I think it definitely can be effective. It's just I would say it doesn't defeat the purpose of a meal plan, but a meal plan, usually when most people are asking for it, it's because they don't want to do that type of work.
Yeah, I agree. I have had some outliers who they do want the variety and they do want the meal plans, but it seems to be that almost like boredom or like it just feels stagnant to them, and that will actually
Right.
hurt their adherence, which is so interesting because people are so different. Like one person, they'll just eat like a robot, like you were describing, just
Yeah.
meal A, meal B every single day of my life, no problem. I'm hitting my goals, great. And then you have someone else who's like, I liked those meals last week, but I want completely different meals this next week because otherwise I'm going to blow my brains out. And different strokes for different folks, I guess, as long as you're hitting your
Right.
goals, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh man, but it's so true. Like I'm the type of person that certain meals I could eat the same thing every single day, not have a problem. Like I'll eat some form of egg every single day for breakfast, and I've done it for years, and it doesn't bother me. But some people cannot be like that, and they'll have to eat something different for every single meal.
Yeah. I'm definitely on your side of the fence on that one. I'm very regimented, the same stuff for the most part, but gotta do what works for people, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the last thing I had over here. I think we went through the entire list, which is very impressive.
Yep, I think we killed it. I think this episode was super informative for people. It's a longer one, but I think people will appreciate it. I think we went over a lot of important topics, especially the micronutrients, and the importance of making sure you have the best protein sources in a vegan diet and that it can be done. So I think we did a pretty stellar job.
Yeah, what do you think, listeners? Leave us a comment, subscribe, like.
Yeah, absolutely. Subscribe, like, check us out on YouTube. We'll be uploading this video to YouTube. But until next time, peace, love, and protein.